Regarded as a symbol of the Imperial Japanese Navy's power during the most brutal years of warfare in human history, it was the grandest product of the big ships, big guns era, when global superpowers competed to showcase their strength through the sheer size of their warships. It represented an entire generation of mighty super battleships that once ruled the world's oceans, a colossal flagship, the largest warship ever constructed by mankind. There was no other ship like it. This was Yamato, the greatest samurai warrior of the Imperial Japanese Combined Fleet. From the 1930s onward, as Japan's ruling elite shifted toward extreme militaristic nationalism, their ambition to become the dominant power in the Asia-Pacific region became unmistakably clear. And to achieve that goal, Japan knew it had to possess the most powerful navy ever to sail the world's greatest oceans. They began refurbishing old warships, constructing new ones, and pouring the nation's entire treasury into naval expansion. Yet even that was not enough. As Japan's aggressive expansion increasingly irritated the United States, the prospect of war with the giant on the other side of the Pacific, one whose industrial capacity was 10 times greater, became unavoidable. Japan needed a divine weapon, a single platform capable of confronting multiple enemy battleships at once. And that weapon was Yamato. To prepare for this favorite child, Japan withdrew from the naval treaty with the United States. While American warships were restricted in size due to the limitations of the Panama Canal, Japan was now free to build battleships of virtually unlimited dimensions. By 1937, Yamato's design and armor installation were carried out under absolute secrecy. Her birth marked a dazzling milestone, the largest and most formidable battleship the world had ever seen. If Germany's Bismarck, America's Iowa, or Britain's King George V were considered terrifying engines of war at sea, Yamato was hailed as something even more, an impregnable fortress afloat.
Even the name Yamato reveals the immense expectations placed upon the ship by the Japanese emperor. While some believe it merely refers to a region in present-day Nara Prefecture, few realize that it was also the ancient name of a powerful Japanese empire in centuries past. The histories of many nations are written in blood and tears, and Japan is no exception, forged by a militaristic, aggressive, and deeply feared armed force. Yamato was very much a product of that legacy. With a construction cost of 250 million yen, equivalent to approximately 2.5 billion USD at 2017 prices, Japan finally possessed the divine weapon it had long sought. Commissioned into the fleet on February 12, 1942, Yamato was immediately selected as the flagship of the Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. After briefly serving as little more than a symbolic presence at the Battle of Midway, Yamato spent an extended period being redeployed among various bases, from Truk and Kure to Brunei, in order to provide defensive positioning against enemy attacks. It was not until the autumn of 1944 that this sumo warrior truly entered combat for the first time, joining her sister ship in an attack on American landing forces. Yamato fired her 460mm main guns at U.S. vessels near Leyte Island, sinking the escort carrier Gambier Bay and the destroyer USS Johnston, demonstrating her power and seemingly confirming her reputation as invincible. However, due to the overwhelming disparity in forces, the outcome of the largest naval battle in human history could not be altered. Victory belonged to the Americans. Japanese forces suffered catastrophic losses, and the overall course of World War II was effectively decided. After defeats at Iwo Jima and in the Caroline Islands, Allied offensives in the Pacific steadily closed in on the Japanese homeland. On April 1, 1945, American forces officially launched the Okinawa Campaign, the final defensive stronghold before the Japanese mainland, located only 257 kilometers from the city of Kagoshima. Faced with this situation, Japan was forced to launch a counterstroke in the form of an operation known as Ten-Go.
also referred to as Operation Ketsugo. By order of the emperor, the battleship Yamato, escorted by the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers, sailed towards Okinawa as part of the Special Surface Attack Force. Their mission was to coordinate with kamikaze units and bombard Allied forces. Afterward, Yamato was to run herself aground, turning into an unsinkable fixed gun platform and continue fighting until destroyed.
Fuel was loaded only for a one-way voyage, and the ship would receive no air support. Initially, most officers on board opposed the plan, arguing that it was essentially a suicide mission. In the end, however, they were persuaded to proceed. That afternoon, hundreds of tons of supplies and more than 2,700 officers and crewmen were loaded aboard. Young officers tearfully bid farewell to their families, fully aware that this journey would be a one-way trip. The battleship was commanded by Rear Admiral Ito Seiichi, commander of the 2nd Fleet of the Combined Fleet, along with Captain Aruga Kosaku, a senior Imperial Japanese Navy officer who had previously participated in 2 major naval battles, Midway and the Solomon Islands campaign. We, the people of Japan, have been assigned to a special attack force to carry out a noble mission for the Imperial Navy. The gateway to our nation is under attack. The fate of millions of civilians, including your parents, wives, and children, depends on us. Fight to the end and destroy the enemy. At 4:45 p.m. on April 6th, as both anchors were raised, Yamato finally departed the harbor, heading south with her 9 escort ships. Immediately after departure, officers and sailors began their final drills to boost morale and prepare as thoroughly as possible for the battle ahead. However, the Japanese were completely unaware that on the other side, the Allied forces had already broken their radio communications, and that every detail of this operation had been fully exposed. That evening at 8:10 p.m., while transiting the Bungo Strait, Yamato and the Surface Task Force sailed straight into an ambush. 2 U.S. Navy submarines, USS Threadfin and USS Hackleback, had been lying in wait. All it would have taken was a single mistake from Yamato, and they would have struck immediately. Yet the Japanese were far from the easy target the Americans had expected. At approximately 8:13 p.m., after nearly 3 minutes under surveillance, the radio room and lookout stations transmitted an urgent report to the command. 2 enemy vessels detected off the port side at a distance of 22 nautical miles. Yamato was immediately ordered to increase speed to 22 knots, alter course toward Cape Sata at the southern tip of the Osumi Peninsula, and proceed in a zigzag formation to evade potential attacks. With the target moving too fast and following an increasingly complex course, the 2 American submarines were forced to abandon the pursuit. Instead, they relayed Yamato's position to Task Force 58, a powerful formation that at the time consisted of 11 aircraft carriers and 384 aircraft. Upon receiving reports of the massive Japanese fleet advancing toward Okinawa, 6 battleships from the U.S. Fire Support Group were immediately assigned an interception mission. However, at the last moment, the Americans changed their plan, opting instead for a preemptive aerial assault. At 8 a.m. on April 7, 1945, halfway through the voyage, officers at the lookout station spotted 2 U.S. PBY Catalina patrol aircraft circling directly overhead. The aircraft shadowed Yamato for 5 continuous hours, repeatedly reporting its speed and course while transmitting guidance signals to strike aircraft launching from American carriers. The order to designate targets was issued. Yamato's main batteries and secondary guns were brought to full readiness, their barrels elevated toward the sky, locking on to the 2 massive iron birds above. Knowing that their position had been exposed, the captain ordered the battleship to proceed straight toward Okinawa. The ship turned hard to port and advanced at full speed. The mess halls served the crew their final meal before the battle officially began. At noon, the captain reported to the fleet admiral that he would take command from the bridge and personally direct the decisive engagement. All anti-aircraft batteries were brought to full readiness. At exactly 12:32 p.m., 280 U.S. fighter, bomber, and torpedo aircraft surged toward the greatest battleship in the world. The sheer number of planes was so overwhelming
that from a distance they resembled a swarm of locusts, so dense that even American pilots feared colliding with one another. Every US pilot wanted to be the first to strike Yamato, and that very eagerness shattered the carefully coordinated attack plan. Pilots were granted freedom to engage at will. At 12:34 p.m., Yamato was hit by the first wave. 4 bombs slammed directly into the ship. Over the next 20 minutes, she was struck by 2 more bombs and a torpedo on the port side. For 2 full hours, Yamato attempted to fight back in desperate counterattacks. 10 enemy aircraft were shot down, and 12 American pilots were killed. But it was clearly an uneven battle. The massive battleship had become a rich prize, surrounded by a pack of hungry wolves. After forcing Yamato into a hopeless position, some American aircraft shifted their attacks toward the escorting destroyers, depriving Yamato of 2 of her protective screens. Not stopping there, determined to sink the floating fortress, the US forces launched a second major strike at 2:02 p.m., involving more than 100 aircraft. 4 torpedoes, 3 on the port side and 1 on the starboard side, crippled the ship's central control systems. Yamato came to a complete stop and began to list heavily to port. The Americans then altered their tactics. One squadron deployed deep-running torpedoes designed to destroy the ship's underside. 5 additional torpedoes slammed into Yamato's port side. Seawater flooded in uncontrollably, killing large numbers of sailors. To counter this, the captain was forced to make a brutal decision: flood the starboard side with 3,000 tons of seawater to restore balance. The measure allowed Yamato to remain afloat for a few more minutes, but at the cost of drowning 300 crewmen in the engine compartments. The attacks did not relent. Subsequent torpedoes tore into both sides of the hull. Communication systems were destroyed, forcing officers to rely on signal flags and flashing lights. Chaos engulfed the battleship. A horrific explosion in the makeshift medical station killed everyone sheltering inside, including medics and wounded sailors. Shortly afterward, a massive torpedo detonation near Yamato's stern severed all remaining communications aboard the ship. The distress flag was raised, the steering compartments flooded, and the rudder jammed hard to port. Yamato was now a motionless target, left entirely at the enemy's mercy. In desperation, a group of staff officers crawled onto the deck to meet with the commander for a final conference. By 2:23 p.m., Yamato had absorbed a total of 10 torpedoes and 7 bombs. All resistance had become futile. The ship listed further and further, completely out of control.
Standing on the bridge, Admiral Ito gave the order to abandon ship. He then shook hands with his officers one by one, thanked them, and withdrew to his quarters, choosing to die with the battleship. "Stop! Get out now! The ship is sinking! The battle is over!" Yamato rolled to a 40-degree angle. The captain and many crewmen chose to perish with the ship, while others struggled to escape. Some sailors, too badly wounded to flee, stayed behind, firing until their last rounds and pushing younger men toward the lower decks, believing they still had futures and families waiting for them. Captain Aruga Kosaku tied himself to the railing to ensure he would go down with Yamato. When a petty officer attempted to follow his example, Aruga shouted furiously, "You fool! You're young! You must live for Japan's tomorrow! When the enemy lands, who will be left to fight them?" Even in his final moments, the captain was thinking of the nation's fate. At 2:40 p.m., Yamato listed so severely that the battle flag nearly touched the sea. The massive gun turrets broke free from their mountings and rolled across the deck. Then the worst happened. The forward ammunition magazine exploded. A cataclysmic blast tore through the battlefield. A column of smoke and fire rose to a height of 6.4 kilometers and was visible from a distance of 160 kilometers. Yamato finally capsized, taking 2,498 lives with her and closing a tragic and bitter chapter in Japanese history. The greatest battleship in the world was officially sunk. Several escorting destroyers shared the same fate, while the remainder were heavily damaged. Japan's Special Surface Attack Force was virtually annihilated. Survivors clung to floating debris, wooden crates and supply sacks, waiting for a miracle. Some were rescued by recovery vessels, but many never lived to see it. Some drowned, while others succumbed to their wounds. Amid the chaos, there were those who sacrificed their own lives to give their comrades a chance to survive. Since that sinking, people have often spoken of three of the world's largest yet most futile constructions: the Great Wall of China, the Egyptian pyramids, and the battleship Yamato. But few realize that Yamato fought for nearly 4 hours against more than 400 attacking aircraft simultaneously. And though she was defeated, the battleship Yamato still deserves her place in legend as a symbol of courage and tragic grandeur in the history of naval warfare.